Hi there, everybody. It's Philip Aldridge here from HASANZ. We're just waiting for a couple more minutes to get some more participants aboard. So we've got 20 now. Should be up to 675 registered, so we'll probably get up to about 60 or so shortly. Here they'll come. So we'll start in about a minute or two. Right, we might as well kick off. As I said, my name is Philip Aldridge. I'm Executive Director at HASANZ. This is a webinar brought to you in association with lots of our groups. So this is one of our webinar series, and a few more on the go at the moment. So look on the LinkedIn site, HASANZ on LinkedIn. This is about working productively at home. So we've got 3 presenters today. We've got Margaret and Schaik, Marion Edwin, and Rachel Lilley. And they're all on the screen here, waiting to you, and I'll bring up the presentation. So we'll have about 30 minutes talking from them, and then we'll have 30 minutes Q&A. So I'll be right. Oops, lost me a second. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. Everybody see the presentation? Cool. Rachel Lilley is part of the Occupational Health Physio Group and works at TBI Health. And most of you probably know Margaret and Schaik, who runs Schaik Health and Safety Solutions. Right, over to you, Margaret.
Okay, thank you. So as you all know, we were pushed into a new way of working pretty fast recently, and we have new risks to manage around that. And we acknowledge that there are a lot of essential service businesses working at the moment, but this webinar is mainly based on those working from home. So WorkSafe have sent out some guidance around this, acknowledging, like the rest of us, that we're in unprecedented times. We've never seen a pandemic like this in our generation, and that the focus needs to be on looking after our people, taking a pragmatic approach and working in good faith with our people. And the focus is, again, on managing the risk. Philip, could you flick through the presentation, please?
I think he might have just left. I suspect there might be teenagers on broadband.
Oh, right. Okay, here we go.
Philip,
could you flick through? Thanks.
Sorry, my connection is unstable, so carry on.
Thank you. So again, the focus is on managing the risks, eliminating or minimising those risks as far as reasonably practical. We all know what that means. Thinking about the likelihood, the degree of harm, the knowledge hazard of risk and controls, availability and suitability of controls, and the cost. And for some organisations, working remotely is going to be a long-term plan. So there are risks to consider working remotely long-term, not just in the short term as well. Next, please. Is Philip still there? Thank you. So as you'll know, we had little time to prepare for this new way of working. It was a sudden change. The timeframes were unknown. It was difficult to plan, and so, you know, most of us had limited access to furniture, equipment, resources, and knowledge. Increased other stresses as well. So it was unclear who was an essential service initially. Financial stresses, changes in our daily routine, family around us all the time, and issues with sharing resources. So for most of us who weren't working at home all the time with other family members, you know, issues around where we're going to work, how we're going to work, and access to equipment and resources around that. Next, please. Thanks, Philip. I think one of the biggest issues probably that everyone has been facing is that there's no boundaries between work and home, so no divide between work and home. Childcare, so working without childcare, children not being able to go to school or daycare, and so having to balance childcare on top of work with limited resources. For some, long hours of work and an increased workload, and not being able to do activities that we'd usually be able to do, you know, so going to the gym, swimming, yoga classes, and there also being no access to hands-on treatment at the moment through physiotherapists or occupational therapists or other types of treatment like massage or whatever things that we were using to manage stress. Next, please. Thank you. So we've got just a bit of a profile here of what the risks are around working from home. And some of these will be covered shortly by Marion and Rachel. So we've got illness, obviously physical and mental health falls into that category. Stress and fatigue, which is multiple factors. We're going to talk about that shortly. Workload, working from home. Social isolation is a big issue for a lot of people. And having good, clear means of communicating with your team and people that you're working with. Physical ergonomics, including workspace and resources. Cognitive ergonomics, so using technology and workload. I think we're all experiencing maybe Zoom overload. Ironically, we're doing a Zoom webinar today, but you know, we're all using technology a lot more than we were, and we're no longer having face-to-face meetings. So that obviously has an effect on our cognitive functioning. Environmental ergonomics, lighting and space, and then electricity, just around equipment and overloading of power outlets when we're working from home. I'm going to pass it on now to Marion, who's going to cover some of these risks.
Thank you, Margaret. So what we've got here, up here on this slide is the model that was promoted by ACC between around 2006 and 2012. So some of you will be familiar with the discomfort, pain and injury prevention and management approach. It was always quite a big mouthful. And this is the picture that was commonly associated with what we learned of at the time and called the DPI approach. This model was based firmly in the literature, so was based on what the evidence was showing us very clearly about the factors that contribute to musculoskeletal discomfort and injury risks in the workplace. So the key thing here to acknowledge is that very much it's a systems approach, and there's everything in here that we need to consider, including work organisation, psychosocial risk factors. So if you're feeling a bit more stressed, you may be carrying some more muscle tension, you may be distracted and not focusing so much about on what you're doing and how you're doing it. There's a lot of individual factors as well that increase our risk of exposure to discomfort factors. So if you are short and you have fixed height workstation, you may be finding that there's discomfort issues related to your mismatch with the furniture that you've got. If we're older, we don't tend to recover quite so quickly from various stresses and strains. If you've got young kids, you might have more pressures to deal with just simply because of those factors. Philip, do you want to see if you can just get rid of that picture in front of everything? Thank you. So the DPI approach has this multiple factors that contribute to discomfort, and there's a particularly nice explanation of how these things are cumulative and work together in the tool that was called Habit at Work. Habit at Work is a bunch of resource that was put together as an app available on the web, and many employers and organisations still have this installed on their intranet system, so it has become for many organisations a part of their induction and training programs for their workforce. So this is part of what was Habit at Work. You can use it now still on the web if you use Internet Explorer because the Adobe Flash Player plays up, but it's still around. This shows that when all of these different factors add up, and as a person, if you've got a few environmental things that aren't quite right, the light shining on your screen, a few individual factors that aren't quite right, a few psychosocial factors, you become stressed. And when you get more and more stressed, and it might just be that you tripped over the dog on the way out the house in the morning, that might be the last straw. So next, Philip. and it's particularly poor graphic on this one, but when you use the habit at work tool, it actually shows that you lose control when you explode. So really this is about showing that these factors all add up and impact on us as a person. We can't kind of pull ourselves apart. We have to consider the whole lot together. So I'm going to hand on to Rachel now, who'll start talking about principles of
Can I
healthy
just
work.
jump in there? One question. Sorry, I should have mentioned at the start. It's Philip here again. There's a Q&A. You can ask questions throughout the webinar. There's a button at the top of your screen, the bottom of the screen, called Q&A. So you can type in your questions there, and as we go along, and at the end of the session, the presentations will cover them off.
Great.
Right, thanks Marion, and good afternoon everyone. So we've put together some principles to help those working remotely to improve their comfort and help reduce the chance of developing pain, discomfort or injury while working from home. So these principles include working in a variety of relaxed postures throughout the day, using appropriate break practices, implementing healthy work methods, optimising your home, workplace and environment, and effectively setting up your equipment and furniture to suit you and the tasks being performed. So over the next few slides, myself and Marion will go into these in more details. Next, thanks Philip. So first of all, varying your working posture. So this slide shows a few of a number of postures you could adopt whilst working at your computer at home. Keep your body relaxed, avoiding any unnecessary tension. People often want to know what the perfect posture is, but in truth, there is no perfect posture. Our bodies are designed to move, so the best posture is the next one. Look for opportunities throughout the day to change your posture. Perhaps stand up at a bench or cabinet during a meeting, or kneel or sit on the floor whilst taking a phone call. The options are endless. Next. Break practices. So when working from home, it is easy to miss taking our regular breaks. We're out of routine, and when we're at work, at their office, there are often natural breaks that happen, such as going to a meeting, interruptions from a colleague that might come and have a chat about something, or going to collect printing from a printer. At home, you might find that you have less breaks, or perhaps you'll have more if you've got children around and constantly interrupting you. Ensure you're scheduling your lunch and tea breaks each day, and ideally at a similar time that you would normally do this. And get away from your computer and get outside wherever possible. In addition to these breaks, our body also requires task breaks. These are roughly around 1 or 2 5-minute breaks from your computer every hour. And take the opportunity to perhaps hang out the washing or empty the dishwasher, or play a quick game of hide and seek with your children. Personally, I use an app called Focus Keeper, which gives me a 5-minute break or change in task after 25 minutes of focused activity. If I'm in a teleconference, when the timer goes off, I'll stand up and do some squats on the spot to get the blood pumping. That's the benefit of working in the comfort of your own home. At work, people might stare at you. In addition to the longer breaks, our muscles require micro pauses when we're carrying out repetitive or sustained tasks, such as using the mouse or keyboard. These tasks are short 5 to 10-second pauses every few minutes and allow the blood to return to the muscles, bringing the oxygen that they need and removing the toxins. During the pause, take your hands off the mouse and keyboard and relax them down, shake them out, or do some stretches. And fidgeting is good. The last break is for the eyes. Our eyes are designed to change focal length regularly and not stare at the same distance for hours on end. So the 20-20-20 rule is every 20 minutes, take a 20-second eyeball break and look 20 meters into the distance. In other words, gaze out the window and look across the room and take in your environment. This will relax the eyes and reduce the eye strain. Next. Healthy work methods. So firstly, stretching. So stretching is important to do regularly. It not only increases the blood flow into the muscles whilst you're doing them, but also helps maintain or improve joint flexibility, improve posture, reduce tension and reduce the chance of injury. When holding postures and positions, it's important to adopt a neutral or, other words, a mid-range posture wherever possible. An example of this is when you're typing or using the mouse. Keep your wrists straight rather than deviating to the side. Sustained or repetitive end range postures often are more likely to cause pain, discomfort, and ultimately injury if not addressed. To keep our muscles relaxed, when using the computer, you need to relax your elbows by your sides, have them at around about a 90-degree angle with the mouse and the keyboard position in front of you. As soon as the mouse or keyboard get too far away, the tension in your neck, shoulders and arms will increase. Sitting for more than 6 hours per day increases the risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes and some types of cancer. It can be more difficult to keep active during this time when working from home. You're not walking to meetings, walking to and from the bus or train to get to work and back, or walking 100 metres to the bathroom or print at the other end of the office. Or you may not have that, likely you won't have that sit-stand desk that you might have at work. So we need to find other opportunities to move while at home. This can be going for a walk around the garden or down the street while you're on a phone call, squatting, like I said, while on a teleconference, playing table tennis if you've got one, or kicking a ball around with your children during your lunch break, or starting a step challenge with your colleagues or your family. It's likely that many people's life balance will have been impacted since the lockdown. This can happen when there's not the divide between our working environment and our home. To overcome this, try to work on a separate area, in a separate area to your living area, so that you can separate it from your work. If it's not possible, make sure you pack up your computer and place it out of sight for the evenings and weekends to stop you getting drawn back into it. The last point is to keep hydrated. We all know the importance of keeping hydrated, and it can be overlooked with a change in routine. Make sure you fill up your water bottle at the start of the day and take regular breaks to refill it. This will also ensure that you take more frequent rest breaks to the bathroom. And I'll hand over to Marion.
Just, Rachel, just one question before we move on. You mentioned, one of the questions come in is about that app you mentioned that gives you times out after 25 minutes. Can you just repeat it again?
Yes, it's called Focus Keeper.
Focus Keeper.
Yes.
Great.
It has a little tomato on the icon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jolly good. Right, so one of the important things when you're working from home is thinking a little bit about your actual workspace. And some of us are lucky enough that we have a dedicated workspace. So I actually work from home all the time and have done for about 20 years. So this is my dedicated workspace. It's a planned office with the lighting in the right place and all of those things. But many of you will be working on the kitchen table, on the breakfast bar, in a crummy old desk that you picked up from somewhere in the spare room, or in all sorts of places. There are many options when you're working from home. The good thing is actually at home you have got probably quite a lot of resources for being able to create and improvise improvements to your workspace, and we'll cover off some of those in the next few slides. Importantly, to try to minimise your distractions. So you might be like this poor woman here, balancing several children and tasks at the same time. If so, my heart goes out to you. It's not always easy, and sometimes delightful, but not always best for the work tasks for getting them done effectively. One of the really important things about lots of home workplaces is that they're not the same heating and ventilation supply as your fancy office building with all of that looked after by automated systems. Many home offices are in fact much colder. And you may find that because you've kept the doors and windows closed to keep the house warm, we've had our first snow down here in the South Island, that by 2 in the afternoon you can barely stay awake because in fact you haven't got any decent ventilation at all. So make sure that you are trying to heat and ventilate your space adequately to allow you to stay working comfortably and healthily. It can certainly be a challenge at home. And then, of course, there's the power bill to consider at the end of it all. Lighting is really important. It's really important to recognise that the best position for your screen is not directly in front of the window, even though that's very tempting to look outside. Because if you're looking out the window past, or you've got the window past your screen, the contrast glare between the bright spots outside and your attempt to focus on the screen is really tough for your eyeball muscles to work out how to do, and can certainly result in headaches and more tiredness, and often too odd postural things as you're ducking down to miss the bright spots behind you. Also, you shouldn't have your screen so that the window is directly behind you, because that tends to create a lot more reflection off your screen. Best position is usually with a window to the side, so it can be sometimes worth having a move around of where you've set the desk up, or ironing board, or whatever it is you're working from at home, so that you don't have the issues with the screen reflection and glare as well. Next. Great. So most importantly, with your workstation setup, it needs to fit you. Doesn't matter what the standard height desk is, it needs to fit you. And we actually all come in incredibly huge range of sizes. Some of us have short legs. Some of us have long legs, like Twiggy. Me, for instance, no, lying. And so we need to make sure that we've set it up for us and what our needs are. It can be really tricky if you and your long-legged husband are sharing the same office space. That can sometimes be hard to work through. There are ways and ways. This picture here is actually my dining table with just stuff that I had around. If I didn't have a home-based office, I could work here. This shows some of the options that you can set up with. So you start with your feet on the floor, ideally, and then adjust the chair so that your feet can stay on the floor. Of course, if you've got a kitchen table, for instance, mine is 750mm high, I usually work at a desk that's around 660mm high. So that kitchen table is a good 100mm, 10 centimetres more than would be ideal for me. So way high. If I was having to scrunch my shoulders up, it would actually be impossible. I couldn't do that. So I would have to use cushions on the chair, and then in order to support my feet, I would need a footstool, and that particular footstool happens to be a shoebox, and that would be perfectly acceptable while you're working at home to stack up magazines, wrap them in newspaper, duct tape some stuff together. It'll work, and crank yourself up to the right height. However, with tables, one of the really big issues is that big chunky piece under the table base that is the support structure. And what tends to happen if you're someone like me who's got relatively short waist, so when I'm relaxed with my shoulders, my elbows are fairly close to my thighs, it means that you actually really want to have a very thin desk to let you have relaxed shoulders while you're using the keyboard. So in order to achieve that in this kind of setting, you could, and that's my pizza chopping board that I put the keyboard on, you could use the pizza chopping board and just pull it forward at the table, so as you're sitting there you can actually get the keyboard really close to your knees. Alternately, in that setting, and I'd be more comfortable throwing away the cushions and putting my feet flat on the floor and using that same pizza chopping board directly on my knees, possibly with one of those non-slip tray mats. So those sorts of options you can tweak and improvise with what you've got at home. If the desk is too high, probably you'll need a footstool, or you might be able to go back the other way and go low. Essentially, you want to have a relaxed work posture, or several of them, and you need to be able to improvise to create that. So that whole workstation setup thing at home is really important to make sure you think about and get right. Next.
Marion, just one question that's come in.
Yep.
The question is, can you please state the ideal height for the desk again? Thanks.
I certainly can. The ideal height for the desk should fit you and your task. It is a complete misnomer to think that there is one height that is suitable and acceptable and should fit everybody. If you look at the guidelines for using computers, which is the only document that WorkSafe have actually got up on their website that addresses these issues, the guidelines are very clear that whilst there are some height fixed things in different standards, that is not optimal. It needs to fit your needs. So as an example, if you had an adjusting height desk that should be suited for sitting or standing, you would need that desk to move from at least 650 mils at the low end to, and I actually can't quite remember the top one, 1250 or something like that at the top end. So there's a huge range. Many of the fixed height desks and even the adjusting height desks are far too tall for the average short Kiwi woman, and a lot of average blokes as well. So that whole desk height, do not accept and believe it's appropriate to have a single fixed height. That's okay. It's a bad design thing we haven't quite got right yet. Right, where were we up to before then? Next,
we're moving on.
Philip. Right, so summary for our principles for healthy computer work. So when we started, Rachel showed you the slide that had postures first, and then the appropriate breaks, and then the healthy work methods. And I'm actually going to put it to you slightly around the other way, because in order to create the place where you've got relaxed work postures, you actually need to spend your time and energy thinking about and designing and setting up your workspace and equipment that enables you to work with relaxed postures. So we're putting it around the other way. Think about your workspace first and how you set that up. Go raid the shed for some sheets of ply or something to improve the situation. It's amazing what you can make up. You might have an old real estate sign that you can use as a temporary laptop sort of table at a better position and height. So I just encourage you to be really creative about those options. Are we done? No, we've got another one more. So, key, self-management. When you're working from home by yourself, it's kind of the buck stops with you. However, you do need to have good knowledge and information to be able to do that. And one of the important things for employers and organisations with workers now working from home is that the workers themselves need the knowledge to be able to enable them to do what they need to do to set up their work environment. So really important that you give them that right information and education. So there may be some virtual education sessions that you might need to get set up for your work teams. Yes, we've got hopefully level 4 lockdown ending soon, but there's every likelihood that for many teams they will continue to work from home at least for a good chunk of the time. Early reporting. If someone is feeling the burn and is getting sore, they need to follow the usual incident reporting or discomfort reporting processes for your workplace, and you need to make sure that they are still encouraged to do that. There are a whole bunch of professionals now doing remote work, telework, work from home, virtual assessments to assist with setting up office spaces and to help people to work out what they can do about it. And remembering that at the moment you can't get your hands on physio treatments, so telehealth options are in place for that, but essentially you won't get your hands on. So you can be looking to find a professional that can support your remote working key staff out there working from home, doing the best they can, and help them to set it up. So we recommend using the HASANZ register for finding those people. I'm sure there's more questions out there.
There's a couple more just ready to go. So thank you, Marion, Rachel, and Margaret. We appreciate that. So keep firing the questions in. I'll go through them now. I think the first two are mainly for Marion. Can you see those questions, Marion?
Where am I going to see them?
I'll read them out to you. So one from Barbara.
Yes.
With a fixed chair, ideally trying to get a lumbar support or towel or something behind your back. More of a statement than a
Yeah, there's a few good ways you can achieve this too, Barbara. Hi. You can use, and this is good physio territory, you can use a rolled up towel. So just a hand towel rolled up. You can put a rolled up hand towel in an old stocking or something like that and tie it around the back of the chair. You can safety pin it to the back of a chair if it's a fabric one. You can also use like a jersey, roll it up and use the arms to tie around the back of the chair. If it's tricky because you keep getting up and down, tie the jersey around you and use it as a wearable lumbar roll. And you can use that in the chair. Cushions and things also, do whatever you like with those and hunt something out.
I'll just add to that as well. Our backs do like movement, and when we stand up, it actually puts our back into a more neutral posture. So it's key when you don't, well, all the time anyway, but particularly when you have a chair that doesn't provide good lumbar support, stand up more often. Put your laptop up on I've got a set of drawers behind me, so sometimes when I'm in a meeting and I've got an opportunity to stand, I'll stand there for a bit just to get my spine into a more neutral position.
Another really important thing with backs and back issues is make sure your feet are on the floor. A lot of us get a sore back because in fact our toes are dangling and we're not supported. So making sure you've actually got the desk low enough so that your feet can be on the floor allows you to sit properly in the chair, relaxed through all of your trunk is really important. Now I've lost because there's a whole bunch
talking
of
about feet. There's another question related to that. How do you know if you should use a footstool?
Yeah, if you should only use a footstool, and it's really important here. A footstool does not eliminate the hazard. So the hazard, if you need a footstool, the hazard or the cause of the problem is because the desk is too tall for you, desk and or chair. So it's not the right size for you. The footstool minimises the effect of that, but does not eliminate it. The problem is that the desk is too tall or the chair doesn't go low enough, and you should ultimately be addressing that problem. Lower the desk, lower the chair. So your footstool is just as required if the rest of it's not right. Yeah, it is important. I'm trying to find the questions again.
There's one for Rachel, maybe. So basically, there's different posture adjustments when we are at reading situations from monitor, or at typing or keying in situations. Basically, different positions for different tasks.
That is correct. Yeah, so when we are using a keyboard and mouse, the rule of thumb is that elbow is just sitting just above the desk height. But if you're doing, if you're reading from hard copies or writing, then essentially the desk should be a little bit higher relative to that. And what that does is that brings the task to you. And if we were doing something unlikely for these people listening today potentially, but if you're doing something that requires force, say you were sawing something or hammering something, you want that a bit further away because it requires a bit more pressure going down. So it is task dependent. Finer things closer to your eyes, something that requires more force, usually a bit further down. Hope that answers it.
Yep. One from Claire. Do you have any advice on people who are wanting to create or make a standing desk? Or create or make do with a standing desk?
Yeah, there's some great ways to make standing desks actually. You can do things like a filing cabinet. So a 3-drawer filing cabinet is often, okay. So you can stand at something like that. You can make it slightly taller if you need by boxes, or a visit to the shed and finding a piece of ply, or that real estate sign I mentioned. So there's ways you can just crank that up. It doesn't have to look posh necessarily, it just needs to do the job. You can do things like on your kitchen table, place a smaller coffee table. Make sure it's not going to slip and slide away, so maybe some non-slip bits under the legs, but you can do things like that and it might just be okay. Your best adjustable table, if you still own one, might be an ironing board, and you can do interesting things with ironing boards, including in motel units for when life comes back to normal, because they are height adjustable. So right. That's quite a good option.
Question from Logan around light. How important is natural light in your working environment?
I think I'll say it's probably quite good for your mental health actually, as much as anything, and feeling good about things. But natural light, when it's not in the right place for your screen, if you're working on a screen, can be a nightmare. So when it wasn't by mistake that I've got the office on the southern side of the house, so I'm not getting the bright sun, in my office. Yes, it gets a bit cooler, but the lighting is better controlled. So yes, it's important, especially as we age, we need more light to see what we need to see if we're doing a lot of reading, but on your screen and around your screen, it can be really problematic.
Okay. Here's one for maybe Margaret, maybe the others as well. Does the employer have responsibility to provide equipment if strategies and virtual workstation assessments do not minimise the hazards? So you don't get the ability to get the right equipment. So basically, what are the employer's responsibilities?
Well, if the usual policy is to provide workstation assessments, then that should still be done remotely. And as Marion said, that there's plenty of professionals, providing those services right now. It's important that you engage someone who's competent to do that work. And so seeking someone from the HASANZ register is always a good starting point. But those assessments can be done virtually, and yes, if that is your usual method of managing DPI, then that should still be provided if you're working remotely. Obviously, for some organisations, some teams will be working for months ahead from home. That's a high likelihood of that happening. So, it is really important to continue to provide that support to your people. And if that is your policy, your usual standard policy, that you continue to provide that. Otherwise, you will end up not managing any risk associated with that, and you could end up with an injury. And then you'll go and see a physio, and you might, that might be the sort of ambulance at the bottom of the cliff approach. So you want to be proactively managing that risk.
I might just add to that as well. So that question has disappeared from sight, but you did use the wording a virtual assessment to minimise the hazards. I would suggest that minimising is the last thing that you should be doing. If you can eliminate the hazard by good design and setting up your workstation and your work area better, that's what you should be doing. Too many workstation assessments over many years have provided too many footstools, when in fact the desk height has never been addressed, and that's, in my view, that's definitely a fail in terms of the professional advice that you've been given. So I just think that's just a warning. You might need to be aware of that as you look at this issue with groups of workers.
Okay, there's a plug from Heidi. Hi Heidi. DPI encompasses a holistic view of health, physical, mental, as well as stress in the workplace and work processes. Occupational health nurses are helpful resources to support people as well. So thank you for that, for a plug for occupational health nurses. They can certainly provide help as well.
Absolutely.
One here, do you have any info on posture exercises? I can imagine there will be lots of people that have slumped postures at the moment.
I'm just thinking, Rachel, is there, from your experience, is there a current ACC publication that you can get online with stretches or not?
Ooh, we tend to do it based on the person and what we find and what they're presenting with. So if someone doesn't have any symptoms and we're just looking at posture, so things that open up through the chest, the pec muscles get very tight and round the shoulders forward. So opening up through there is important. Something that extends through the upper back. If you can see me here, sorry, my view's just changed slightly. But even just extending up like that, what that does is it opens up through the shoulders, but it also extends the upper back. Standing, I've mentioned it before, you're much less likely to slump when you're in standing posture and walking. So keep sitting to a minimum. The other key thing with posture is what your neck posture is directly linked to your lower back posture. So if you can picture sitting yourself forward in the chair, so your bottom is sitting halfway forward in the chair, and you're relaxing yourself or your back into the chair, you essentially are creating a bit of a banana shape. Imagine lots of people sitting on a sofa. As soon as you do that, your head comes forward as well. I'm just demonstrating here. So get your lumbar spine or your lower back in an inward curve and the rest of your posture will go into a neutral spine, which is that gentle S shape.
I'm just following up. So the point I was making was that ACC previously have had quite a lot of really good office stretching sorts of publications available. I couldn't find, last time I went to look a few weeks ago, I couldn't find what I would look at as a really handy, good office stretches publication any longer on the ACC website. So I think I've got an old version on my system, and I'd be really happy to share that with anyone who wants to drop me an email as well, because some of those resources are really good to be able to share with your teams. Things like the WorkSmart Tips resource is no longer available as well, which is something we've been working with WorkSafe and ACC on for the future. But it's tricky. Can I answer the question about?
And actually, I've got one I can send out if someone wants it as well.
Yeah,
just
perhaps we
flick
could
your
make
emails through.
wee package. I'd like to answer that question about I use a stool, not a chair, feet flat on the floor and relax. What else should I do? Get a chair with a back and move lots, and make sure, one of the bits we haven't said, make sure that you separate your, if you're using a laptop, screen and keyboard need separation. Because laptops are squished together, it tends to make your head go to see down, and then your shoulders go up to squeeze up to see the keyboard. So they're shocking for posture. So separate it out, get a separate screen or a separate keyboard and mouse, so that you can position the screen where you're not going to be scrunched and your shoulders aren't going to be up around your ears. Yeah, Habit at Work, mentioned by Marion, is interactive. It's a great tool, but many systems struggle to use it with the newer browsers, so you really do need to go through your old browsers like Internet Explorer to be able to use Habit at Work. It's still a great resource. Yes, many yoga resources, absolutely right. Thank you, Heidi. There's some good ones.
There's a question here from Claire, a follow-up question. Is it important to make sure the mouse is at the same level as the keyboard?
Usually. And not too high. Mice can be tricky little blighters because it's about the positioning where next to, in relation to the keyboard. So normally, if you've learned to touch type, you'll be thinking of your keyboard as the center of your keyboard being at the sort of GH keys, or B for belly button is what a lot of blokes like to think of, because they didn't learn to touch type. So the center of your keyboard should be lined up with your nose and your tummy button. If you've got a keyboard that then has the numeric keypad to the right, often if you're right-hand mousing, you have a mouse that's actually far too far away on the right-hand side. So that's one of the reasons why left-hand mousing is not a stupid option, and there's techniques and tips for how you can do that successfully. Contact me, I've got some info on that. But it's so there's a whole lot of technique and skill around setting that up so it's right. So mouse position is one of those where ergonomist standard answer, it depends on a whole bunch of your setup details.
There's one here from Sharon talking about ACC has some generic stretches, but they aren't great. Co-Kinetics has excellent resources, as well as the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety. Thanks,
the other thing I'll say with that, and just refer to Rachel, is that you may need to be referring to those professions and professionals that are skilled in these areas.
Yep. Information. I think there's probably a need to send some information out. We'll talk to you, Marion and Rachel, about that. We'll put it on some site.
Yeah.
Sounds like there's a need for that generic, some basic stuff.
I guess I think it's really important for, if there's a bunch of people here from the different health and safety professions, really important that the organisations you're working with kind of deal with this at a good professional level. And that their workforces receive the right level of information. And some organisations will have had great systems in place for educating their workforce before all this happened. Others, this will be completely new to them. So make sure you don't shortchange them on the quality of the information that they're provided with. And it is really difficult at the moment because we're in the situation where WorkSafe are only just now beginning to work up resource around addressing musculoskeletal health risks, only just at the very beginning of that. So we don't have a really sound and robust range of resources like we had when we had DPI program in full flow. And we are in a bit of flux. So I think it's the idea from Sharon using some of the other international resources might be the best we can do at the moment, to be fair, which is really unfortunate.
Right, is the presentation be offline? Yes, we'll NCICM is going to load it up on their site for members, and we'll put it up on our site, HASANZ site. So we are recording this, and so Zoom has some great functionality to be able to record it.
I think we've answered all of those questions.
Most of these questions. Are there any other questions? We're going to 10-15 minutes if we need to. So if you've got a burning desire, put your question in the Q&A box and we're going to cover it off. While we're waiting for any final questions, any comments, Margaret, Rachel?
No, I think we're
Keep moving.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it take home message?
Yeah. Put the washing out.
Yeah.
Put the washing out. Oh, actually, good question from Heidi there. Has it been difficult to get proper equipment during the lockdown? We have discovered that if you are an essential service provider, and some of you still will be, and some of your businesses certainly will be, Harvey Norman was one of the suppliers that had a limited range of furniture and equipment that you could order online and have delivered. So for some people, they really do need to just go, I just need to get myself a decent chair. And that's been a good thing to do. I will say that the range is limited and you do need to be a bit of buyer beware on that. Don't go for chairs with arms.
There are more. I've got a bit of a list. We put one together because we've got businesses that we are seeing and wanted to know where they could get equipment from. And I know Office Max are delivering essential items. Oos Care weren't and now are allowed to. No trials of equipment anymore during this time until further notice. But there are a few that, there's more than that, of businesses that are suppliers that can supply equipment during this time.
And
a couple
again,
here, PB Tech suggests,
yes,
and
yep.
Warehouse Stationery again, but I support Marion's view that an important thing is to assess the equipment before you purchase it.
Yep. I mean, absolutely. But I mean, the whole thing of really far too easy to finally make the decision to buy a sit-stand desk and then not get the one that goes low enough for what you need. And that's, to me, that's just such a lost opportunity to actually get it right. So really look carefully at the specs of the equipment. Look at the weight range that the table will be able to move up and down. Get it, it's worth spending a little bit extra often and get it right.
Here's one for Margaret. Any suggestions on working with kids at home and getting into a good work pattern? That's probably a good luck one, I think.
Yeah.
I've been in the garage.
Yeah, no, that's a hot topic, isn't it?
It's not PC to tie them to a stake in the middle of the lawn either, is it? No.
There's lots of suggestions. Some of them probably aren't very legal. But we do actually have some guidance that we can share with you on tips from working from home with kids that we've put together in our own team for some of our clients. So we'll make that available. I'll send that through to you, Philip, and we can send that out and post it on the website.
And one of the ergonomist tips in that regard is to be really realistic about what you can achieve while you're working from home. It is not the same as an office environment. It is not as controlled. You really need to be, I think this the thing we keep saying, be kind to ourselves as well as others, because you probably won't get an 8-hour work day in unless you're working for 12 hours, Margaret. So just be kind and don't overachieve.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of information coming from the Ministry of Education and through the schools around making sure that there's routine in place for kids, making sure they get exercise, otherwise they're going to be bouncing off the walls and you're going to be bouncing with them. So, just practical, pragmatic stuff, and not expecting too much from yourself or from your kids. I think, you know, we're all adjusting to the new environment, and but we'll send out some tips. We'll make those available for everyone.
Yeah, there's one suggestion here from Sharon talking about mental health. America, there's lots of tips for parents, special tutors. Unfortunately, most involve internet and technology. Certainly, a mental health America might be an option as well.
Yeah.
Marion, there's a question there about desks. You see, there's stand-up desks. Which ones are best? Adjustable desk risers. Any comments on those questions?
Oh, the desktop risers. Yep, they can sometimes be a good option. Again, I'll say, I mean, and again, what you've got and what works when you're working from home is fantastic. Use it. I sometimes think they're quite expensive for what they are, and that they're still not a really good fix. So personally, if I was spending several $100s on an adjustable desktop riser, I'd be really tempted just to go, damn it, I'll buy the desk and get a sit-stand desk instead. I sometimes think they just really are a gimmick, and they market them pretty well, but not always the best option ultimately. But if you've got one and it works while you're at home, it's brilliant. Go for it.
What about the best type of stand desk? Hydraulic, wind up, electric?
Again, standard ergonomous answer. It depends. The hydraulic ones, so the electric ones are brilliant because they are touch of a button. You can go up and down in seconds, and you should go up and down in seconds. The hydraulic ones are more like the desktop variation ones. They can be quite forceful to actually adjust, and I know some people struggle to actually do the adjustment with them. They're sort of okay if we're all strong, so some of them are tricky. The wind up ones can also be quite good, but it depends on what sort of tasks you're doing and how much you organise it. They can be really good in a hot desk situation where you just have to kind of adjust it once or twice as people change in their shifts. So again, the one that you have will be fabulous.
Right.
Posture work up with the exercises. If a massage, you're asking employer for employees. I don't get that question.
Yeah, do I? Perhaps one question from me is you've got people working from home. If you're an employer or your manager, how do you know, or how can you give yourself reassurance that your employees or your staff are manage themselves appropriately? Because you have obviously a duty of care, and employees have their own duty of care, but as a manager, you have some overarching duties. So how can you go about that? And I've seen things say, get your employees to set up and take a picture and send it back to you type thing, which is, what do you think, Marion? What do you think, Rachel? Margaret.
Margaret, I was going to say, what do you think? I kind of think taking a picture and sending it back to your boss, what on earth is that going to show? It's actually not easy to do a good assessment of someone's setup virtually. It is tricky because we should be looking at posture and task method and all sorts of things. So it does take longer actually to do a good virtual assessment. So I kind of like a bit of a grain of salt if you aren't skilled and know what you're looking for and know that your team are well educated. That's may not end up with any use at all out of that tick box.
Yeah, I think it's a communication issue. So we're all figuring out how to communicate in different ways, and so there's different level of communication required when we're all working remotely. And I think going back to the principle of touching base with people on a frequent basis is usually a good place to start. Keep that dialogue going. Set up daily meetings or weekly meetings. I think all of us are probably using technology to a much greater degree to communicate while we work remotely. And so having those conversations as a preventative rather than a reactive measure, I think is a good starting place. And picking up on those issues early if there are issues. Yeah, rather than leaving it, a couple of weeks or a month. I think communication is pretty, it's a no-brainer really, isn't it? It's quite simple, but we've all been finding our feet on how we can communicate more effectively as teams, with this new way of working.
So if people do have issues, like you get a bad back or you start getting sore wrists or whatever it is, Rachel, can you explain how they contact physios or people now for help?
So firstly, they should be going to their manager and reporting it that way. And often businesses should have processes in place to manage those situations. So if someone's got pain discomfort, they're doing an early incident form and they're following that process. There's certainly businesses, as do ours, out there who are doing virtual workstation assessments. And so when we're doing those, we're looking at, we're asking questions around obviously their setup and their work habits and their symptoms and what aggravating these is. And then we'll give some advice as to what things they need to implement and whether there's some stretches, some postural changes, some habits that they need to change. And then sometimes we'll be getting them to see via teleconference the clinic-based physios for specific advice as well. So it depends on how they present. But key is report it early. The longer someone has symptoms, the longer it takes to resolve.
Best time to act on it is when you start to feel the problem, not in 4 weeks' time.
Right. So we've got 3 or 4 minutes left. Any final questions? We covered most of these questions off already, I think. Yes, we have covered off. Any other final questions? Last chance.
I guess I'm just going to have a stab at Roya's comment at the end there, so it's kind of a mixed bunch of questions. So asking, so I think what they're getting at, yes, there is a mixed range of factors that contribute to discomfort, and it's important that an employer is aware of those things and ensures that their workers understand what they can do personally, what each of us can do as we're working to set it up best for us. But it's also important that the employer takes responsibility for perhaps the workload that is being that they're putting on the person, and the equipment and things that they're being provided with to do the job. So it is definitely worker and employer need to work together to address the issues, and as Margaret said, really good communication is at the absolute heart of that.
If the questions come in via chat, someone who works as a project administrator in construction, what courses would you recommend to do to work as a health and safety coordinator in construction? Okay, well, it's not on this topic so much. Probably some from my take, and Margaret may have a view about health and safety coordinator courses in construction, but it's probably the health and safety rep courses, which are usually 1 or 2 day courses. Margaret, got any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of qualifications available. So if you're wanting to head into a career in health and safety, then looking at a certificate or a NEBOSH certificate or something similar is a good place to start. Or you can go straight to a tertiary qualification. So if you're wanting a career in the health and safety profession, aiming to do a tertiary level qualification is definitely a good place to start. There are other short courses that are available. So I know that SiteSafe have a number of health and safety courses available for managers and advisors, so you can check them out. But there are, specific requirements if you're wanting to work in the health and safety profession. It's a good idea to look at doing a diploma or something similar if you're really serious about a long-term career in health and safety.
Yeah, places like Impact, Business Central, EMA, Canterbury Chamber have short courses of various things, as well as the level 3s and level 4s.
Yeah, Victoria University, Massey University, the Southern Institute of Technology. I think if you go to the NZISM website, you can actually click on all the generalist qualifications that are available. So check that out. There's a whole list there that you can have a look at.
Cool. All right, so just about ends the seminar. Thank you for that. Thank you for your attendance today. Hope you enjoyed that. What we'll do is we'll get this, there's some content needed to be up on our website, and we'll try and get it out to everybody once I figure out how to do that on Zoom. So there's a few things around information, resources, and tips on working from home. So thank you for that. Any final comments, Margaret, Rachel, or Marion?
Time to take a break, folks.
Yeah, take a break. Get out, do some squats or some stretches. Yeah. Thank you all. Have a great day. Stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.